The next segment is dealing with scaling solutions to not be redundant. Mr. Dan Dunmoyer is President and CEO of CBIA, the California Building Industry Association. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Vice Chairman Nilo happens to be my senator, so it'll be nice to be today, Senator. Senators Becker and Richardson. My name is Dan Dunmoyer. I'm President and CEO of the California Building Industry Association, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. I do want to share a few thoughts, but just to give you my background perspective, Amy Bach and I were working together on the Oakland Hills fires in 1991. Before that, I was a consultant to this committee in the other house on finance and insurance with a gentleman named Patrick Johnston and Ross Johnson. I had the privilege of serving as overseeing all disasters in the state of California for Governor Schwarzenegger as well as his entire cabinet. As was mentioned, I did work for Zurich and Farmers Insurance. I'm a recovering insurance lobbyist. But today I'm here to talk about housing and how we bend the curve and how we collectively as home builders and as community builders, how we address the fire issue. I'm very intrigued by Senator Becker's leadership on Senate Bill 254. I'm only on page 87, but I do hope to finish that and want to be part of the solution because we've found it very difficult to build homes without utilities and without insurance. And so, matter of fact, my greatest focus on this on behalf of our association is the fact that when you go to buy a home in California, it's principal, interest, tax, and insurance. And the higher the insurance cost, the fewer homes we sell. We also build all the rental units in California, 90% of them. We also build the affordable housing units. Those are capped at 4%. Affordable housing units can't increase rents more than 4%, but insurance has gone up 400%. Same for apartments. We have this thing called rent control, but yet insurance has gone up hundreds of percent. So this whole issue of housing and insurance and how we deal with this issue is not only essential to the insurance issue and stopping major fires, but it's also addressing our shelter issue, our housing issue in California. So we're very focused at this at CBIA because without solutions to these issues, our ability to address the housing policy crisis, as we call it, is really also put in jeopardy as well. So let's think positively here, and I'll give you some suggestions, and I believe you have some materials there, but I'll walk you through this and see if we can. In fact, I'm going to go backwards here. Sorry. So effectively, a couple core principles, and these are all touched on by the experts behind me, but today I want to let you know there's good news, and the good news is we are building communities now to address this fire risk. I say we, it's the home building industry, but in particular, you heard the name IBHS, the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. So a few years ago, we couldn't get insurance for condominiums. And this is down in that great community you heard about, Rancho Mission Viejo, which is the best master plan community in America, not because they're my member, but you can talk to IBHS, you can talk to Dave Winokur, you can talk to Nancy Watkins. They've all toured the facility. Our Commissioner Lara has been there as well. And this is a great example of how you do it right. And I mentioned that when you look at these issues, the core principles are listed here. Decreasing the probability of initial ignitions from direct flame, protecting the neighborhood from ember attack, which you heard about so effectively from my colleagues, allowing the neighborhood to act as a fuel break, which Nancy talked about, and slowing the fire spread. So this is kind of the key component. And I want to let you know that we were thinking we already build homes in California to the highest fire standard, which we do, but we learned that just because we tell the insurance industry we're a good risk doesn't mean they believe us. So that's the partnership with IBHS. And that's when we said, well, if that is the best science in America and the insurance industry is supportive of them, then let's take the best science and take it to the next level. And so there is now this first community in America that's being built as a neighborhood, not an individual home, but as a neighborhood to this high fire standard. So this is Dixon Trail. It's down in the city of Escondido, and this is an example of the first community to try to see if we can build a whole neighborhood to deal with this fire sensitivity. So as you look at this is what it looked like before we started building. It's surrounded in what is considered a high fire severity zone. As you can see, the canyons are not set up well for fire. They're actually a great area for embrocast to occur. And so the question is, can you really build in these communities and build so a community doesn't burn down? So specifically what we're looking at, and you heard, again, our experts, this is how we are trying to build our homes to address this. There are kind of four key components here. One is already touched on, Class A roofing. So the good news is that's how we build with everywhere in California. But it used to be that we would build with Class B roofs that burn down. The other building features effectively are this zone around the 5 foot. We like to call it the safety zone, not zone 0, because that sounds like it's a negative. But the safety zone around, and it, depending on Board of Forestry or IBHS, it's 5 feet for IBHS. It's the eave length for Board of Forestry. We look at the issue too then of the windows. Dual pane windows are pretty common in California, but they need to be tempered. And then, of course, that $20 fix that was offered to you, which is the eaves. That combined is California's been already at that standard except for the 5 foot zone now since around 2012. Came out in 28, but we started building this in 2012. So you'll see this dynamic where if we build to this standard, we can greatly mitigate the likelihood of a community going up in flames. The other thing I just want to touch on here is that fact that unlike wind and other disasters such as hail, fire safety for homes requires a community effort. If we're all neighbors, and a couple of us decide to take what is being said today seriously, and we go out there as Nancy did and cut down our rose bushes, or like Amy Bach does, and we get the data that we have these apps, and we go and make sure our home is fire safe. If the whole neighborhood doesn't do it, unlike hail and wind, we all go up in smoke. So if you're in Florida and you have a really good roof and the neighbor doesn't, it doesn't really matter. They lose a roof and you keep your home. Same thing, in that context of hail. If I have the right roof and I spend the extra money, my roof doesn't collapse, my neighbor's does, or vice versa. But with fire, I can have my home perfectly manicured, all the eaves taken care of, but if the other neighbors don't play the game of fire safety and work hard in this area, the whole community suffers. So KB Homes, California-based company, came forward in partnership with IBHS and put together this entire neighborhood in Escondido, all 64 homes that were built to these high fire standards recognized by IBHS. And I'm pleased to say this is a first. There's now two. They have one up here just outside of Sacramento. And so they have proven that this is not only a theoretical concept, but a positive concept for building neighborhoods. And the best news about this, whenever we look at codes in California, we are the code geeks at CBIA, and our team is more involved in analyzing codes than any other association in America because we change our codes here every 18 months. The average is every decade. And so we look carefully at not just, how do you reduce energy usage and increase energy efficiency, and how do you, we have solar roofs in California. But the great news about fire safety is that it can be done at a relatively cost-effective measure. The only big issue that we haven't been doing that I'll touch on is in this zone 0, or the safety zone, is our fences. And this is why, basically our fences today are wood, generally speaking, except for high-end communities. So they serve as a fuse. Remember those Looney Tune cartoons, that long fuse when something goes to a bomb? Well, the sad part is if your back fence is up against some sort of a rural area that has brush, and the brush touches your back fence, it follows the fence line and eventually comes to your home and goes up the eave and starts the entire home on fire. And that happens home after home after home. And that example that Frank talked about, where once 3 or 4 homes go, the whole neighborhood goes. Once 3 or 4 fences go, unless the 5 feet that touches the home is made, unless it's made out of steel or cinder block, then the home goes up in flame. That's the one thing we are adjusting to. It sounds simple, but a steel or wrought iron fence or a cinder block fence can be very expensive. We're finding that steel fencing isn't that expensive, and that's a $3,000 increase. So the good news is on fire safety in California, we can build at a very cost-effective measure, in a cost-effective approach, and make our homes fire safe. Now let's talk quickly about the community, and I'll wrap up. So how do you build a fire-safe entire community? And that comes back to this issue, what we call master planning. So this is where, Senator Nilo touched on this, but this is where we kind of have some challenges. The best, safest communities have a 30-foot distance between homes. Well, we're trying to build everything on top of each other. We want to build in, we want to build up, we don't want to build out. But that's the best fire safety mechanism, is to have, that way you don't jump from home to home and you can actually stop the fires from happening. So we are working with IBHS on condominiums and apartments and affordable housing. How do we protect those? And a lot of it has to do with the same standards. But as you look at what we are seeing, as you look at how to plan entire communities, a master plan community plans to the highest level of IBHS standards, and the entire mechanisms, as you look at it, how the wind patterns come in, where is the best place to configure the community. We now put citrus around communities. We put golf courses around communities. We put hillsides that are watered by gray water. So when it's 105 degrees in Southern California in July, the hills are green. It's that potable water that comes out of your shower and your toilet. It's actually purified. You can almost drink it, but you don't. But you put it on your hillsides, and you have green hills in Southern California in the summer. If you plan the community accordingly, it doesn't burn. And that's not just me trying to sell you a house. That's me telling you that since 2017, since we've had these major conflagrations, we have not lost one master plan community built since 2010 to fire. So this is a way for us to be excited as a state and a community and know that there are solutions. Last thing I just wanted to say is we are very interested and very supportive of Commissioner Lara's sustainable insurance strategy. It is our desire for this admitted market to come back in force. And it's our desire when they look at these communities that we are building to say it's in a high fire risk area, but it's built to standards that mitigate from fire. The last thing I'll say, and again, I end up building more homes, and this is Dave Winokur. This isn't me being the salesperson for more homes in California. And Nancy Watkins touched on this too. Building that moat around the old homes, those new communities with better roofing, better fences, better eaves. If we were to build just on the urban edge of the old urban or suburban areas, a small amount of new housing, you could radically reduce the conflagration risk of California. You could solve our housing problem. You could reduce the risk of fire. You could reduce the cost of insurance and thus lower it not only for the new homes, but also the older homes. So we ask you to consider that. I know the next word that comes out of your mouth is, well, yeah, that's called sprawl, Dan. And let me just put it in simple terms. California has only built, this is a CARB statistic, California Air Resources Board, has only built a stick or brick, a freeway or hospital or school on 6.8% of California. If we only added 1% more of build out on our housing in California, we could conserve 93% of our land either through federal lands, state lands, or through our farming industry and still meet our housing needs, protect our communities from fire, and address this issue of how we build not only new homes to the high standards, but protect our own old homes to the standards needed to protect overall risk for conflagration. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm glad to respond to any questions. We desire to be part of the solution and appreciate being included in today's conversation.
Appreciate your patience and your testimony very much. Questions for Mr. Dunmoyer? Members? Jump. Senator Richardson.
Just to comment, thank you very much for your presentation today to show that it can work. That's encouraging. My question would be, though, is what do we do for the existing homes that aren't in an upcoming planned development? What are the thoughts of that? The costs associated with it, obviously, for people to take out, their current fence and put in a wrought iron or a cinder block, they are actually quite expensive. What suggestions do you have that we would address that for the existing homes that are out there?
That is the question, because we have about 14.3 million structures, and we only build 100,000 new structures a year. So you're right, it's that existing housing stock, Senator. A couple thoughts. We have seen fire-wise communities. So communities that come together, even older communities, that take the time to clear brush and debris around the backside of those communities, look at where their trees are, look at how their houses are maintained. It's positive peer pressure. You work with your local fire chiefs. So you would bring Frank in his former life, and you would ask the experts of the local fire departments, what does it take to make this community more fire resilient? That just building or being mindful of the brush and the chaparral and the other areas surrounding the community and protecting those and cleaning those up annually will help tremendously. as you do go to rebuild, over time you have to put on a new roof. It might take 30 years, but when you do, make sure it's a Class A roof. And then look at the eave component. It was suggested it is $20 at Home Depot. And most people over time, because of the high cost of utilities, are putting in dual pane windows. So just educating people that, no, you're right. I mean, if you were to do that outright on day one, it's $60,000 probably. But if you can do it collectively as a community to avoid the growth of brush, chaparral, look at trees, look what's hanging over your eaves, clean out your gutters, and prepare your homes and pull away, move to rock versus bark around your house. All those steps can, over time, help reduce the risk of fire at a relatively low cost if it's done community-wide. So it has to be all of us as neighbors rising up together saying, let's take the steps to protect our neighborhood. Those steps actually don't cost that much. It is the structural changes, the roofing, the siding over time, but the moving away the ember cast potential for conflagration can actually be done just by sweat labor from yourself as a homeowner and everybody doing it together and positive peer pressure to get it done.
Thank you, Senator. Any other questions? Thank you very much for your
Thank you,
patience.
Senator. Thank you, committee.
Appreciate it very much.